Happy anniversary! Lyra heartstrings peeked her eyes open, being slightly startled from the mare in her sight of her vision. Just inches from the bedside stood Bonbon, a smile on her face and her eyes glimmering with happiness. Lyra came into her senses with a giggle and smiled back. Happy anniversary, she replied with a joyful tone to her voice. In response, Bonbon just presented her lips to Lyra's, to which Lyra accepted, enjoying her mare friend's embrace in that moment of bliss. It had not been 5 minutes into their day, and already she was satisfied. The kiss broke as Lyra yawned and rubbed her eyes, as free as the leftover sand in the corners of her eyes, planted there be sand mare in the night prior. Bonbon giggled at the sounds of Lyra's long, exaggerated yawn, turning away from the bed. What do you want for breakfast, sleepyhead? Bonbon asked sweetly. Anything is fine, Bonbon, replied Lyra, stretching slowly to find her way out of the bedsheets. Blueberry pancakes it is, then, Bonbon concluded. Just don't fall asleep again. We've got a long day ahead and we can't afford to lunge around. All right. I'll be down in a minute. Just give me a minute to straighten up, Bonds. Lyra promised, lifting up from her covers of her body and planting her hooves on the floor. All right, I'll get the pancakes started. Just don't forget to brush the back that's stuck in your mane again. Just make sure it doesn't get stuck there, Bonbon concluded. Don't worry, Bonds, I won't, Lyra said, with a sheepish smile that spelled out reasons that made Bonbon unsure if she should have left Lyra alone as she walked out of her room. Once the coast was clear, Lyra proceeded to the bedroom bathroom, closing it behind her. To wake herself up a little faster, Lyra provided the wash rag with some hot water and wiped her face a few times. The heat and steam was more soothing than anything, and as a result, Lyra had begun to fall asleep again. Lyra caught herself, and to counteract with the effects of the heat, she quickly sifted the water temperature running from the tap to ice cold. She soaked the rag again and ran it over her face, quickly countering all the effects of the hot rag. In a mix of her simple naivety and sheepish actions to resolve the issue, she muttered out 2 words, staring herself at the mirror. I'm up. After breakfast, what seemed like a 5-star meal only fit for the finest of mares, Lyra and Bonbon had proceeded with their plans for the day. Lyra had managed to style her mane without getting any snags, despite her small conflict with the hot wash rag just before. She wanted to look decent for her beloved Bonbon, and just a glance of bafflement in the light blush on the bottom of Bonbon's cheeks. She clearly had succeeded. The blueberry pancakes that Bonbon made were sweet and nothing short of delicious. Even though it was meant to be simple and quick, it seemed like it had been cooking for a 5-star chef. Bonbon was a great cook, regardless, but Lyra knew it was Bonbon's way of showing her that she had never regretted that moment of being wedded to her. Despite their nativity, she found it a bit more cute than anything, and it was more qualities about Lyra that Bonbon loved. The 2 of them had been friends since high school, but their first meeting had not been the most pleasant of greetings. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Bonbon, or Hard Candy, as she had been addressed back then, was a group of mean mares that picked on the more unusual students. Lyra was one of those students, constantly spectating a world beyond Equestria after the ligaments of different lengths. She thought it'd be some sort of bizarre and disfigured hoof imprint, or possibly otherworldly creature from beyond Equestria. This had caught the eye of Bonbon's group of mean mares and resulted in relentless taunting, harassment, and misery for Lyra. Bonbon, or Hard Candy, was far better than brutal and relentless, even inflicting physical pain towards the young aquamarine mare. Lyra had been cornered in the alleyway by Bonbon's group, and it was just at this point that Lyra had reached a breaking point. Bonbon had gotten into Lyra's face, taunting and laughing and spitting Lone Filly's face. Once the spit made contact, Lyra struck back in defense, landing a hard kick to Bonbon's ribs. The impact made Bonbon falter a bit, just a little, quickly regained her composure, and striking back at Lyra with punches and kicks. By the time it was over, Lyra was on the ground in a great amount of pain. She was bleeding from her mouth and crying from where the painful strikes and the mental pain that she had no choice but to toughen it through. The school system was mediocre and preferred to watch students get tortured, so Lyra had no help there. Out of all the hardship, Lyra had to make excuses not to go to school, starting with the fake cold that lasted 4 days, and no matter how hard she tried to convince her mother and father otherwise, she had to go back to her personal Tartarus. The bullying continued for weeks until Lyra was faced with a test of forgiveness. One day in the halls, Lyra had spotted the gang of mean mares Bonbon had been a part of. They had been cornered with some pony that were attacking their prey with vulgar insults of anger. Lyra wanted to just keep walking and not even get involved, but something was really telling her to stay. She had not. She would never have been wedded to her previous Bonbon. It was then, when Lyra had caught an eye of a victim, that she conflicted whether or not to help end the violence. On the floor, two streams of tears, visible injuries, was Hard Candy. Was one of the mare that had made a school living Tartarus for Lyra. Part of her was urging her to jump in and help, while never wanted her to see the worst enemy receive more torture as Bonbon or Hard Candy had dealt with her. Much conflict infused the young Lyra until she saw that Bonbon had made eye contact with her. She didn't notion Lyra to help. She only started humiliation and desperation, not even expecting Lyra to help her of all ponies. Why would she? Another kick was inflicted to the leg, following an audible crack that echoed in Lyra's ears. Hard Candy had been broken, and it wasn't long before the wailing scream of pain and desperation cry for help escaped Bonbon's mouth. The mares just laughed at Hard Candy's screams and finally backed off. Ending the assault with a single round of spit being fired at their victim. Luckily for Lyra, she wasn't their next target, and they just left in the opposite direction. Lyra wasn't so sure what to do, eyeing now the broken mare that she had a deep hatred for. She stood up motionless for a minute or two, debating on whether or not to walk over or help her worst enemy, or to follow the lead of her tormentors by adding more a wad of spit to her injuries. She really wanted to add the additional torture. But then she remembered that back day, when she was the same position as her worst enemy. If she had just added insult to the injuries that Not So Hard Candy already had, she would be no better than those mares that tortured her. As much as Lyra didn't want to, she swallowed her envy down the pit of her stomach, and walked over to where the Hard Candy lied in pure agony. At first, Bonbon cowered, afraid that Lyra was just going to get her much-deserved revenge, but became shocked when Lyra didn't attack her. Instead, Lyra just only held out her hoof in an attempt to assist her. "Come on, you need help," Lyra said through her gritted teeth. "I don't understand," Bonbon replied in confusion. "I don't deserve your help, after all the things I've done to you." "You're right, and you don't deserve my help," Lyra said. "In fact, I'm the last mare you deserve help from, but that's how I am." Bonbon was baffled. She didn't know whether or not to trust this mare that hated her the most. "Do you want my help or not?" Lyra asked bluntly. "I'm not going to hurt you if that's what you're afraid of." "Why, though? I've done nothing but treated you like manure since your first day here. How can you be so generous to some pony who doesn't even deserve it?" "Because I forgive you," Lyra finalized softly. Bonbon once again was baffled. You what?" Bonbon muttered. "I forgive you," Lyra repeated in a calm voice. The words Lyra had spoken continued to repeat in Bonbon's ears. A sudden wave of emotion and sadness took hold of Bonbon's soul. Tears immediately began to shed as she burst into a state of emotion that Lyra was even shocked at. Lyra would have never thought that there was a great shred of anything nice of any body of a pony so cruel. But she wasn't the one to hold a grudge on any pony, even if they didn't deserve any kindness. She abandoned her motion of helping Bonbon up, instead leaned down to where she was on the cold ground. Bonbon was too distressed to focus, so Lyra did the best thing she could have done in this situation. She leaned down inwards with her hoof extended and wrapped them around the distraught mare. The warmth and tightness of the hug caused Bonbon to jump up in surprise. This was different kind of feeling than Bonbon had ever felt. It was warm, welcoming, and friendly. She hesitated, continuing to sob, but found herself returning to the hug, her hooves then caressing over Lyra's soft aquamarine fur. It felt like as if someone had never felt before. Something her father found useless in the eyes, a blossoming of a promise, the blossoming of a friendship. Bonbon hugged her tighter, sniffling as she spoke. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I put you through a lot of Tartarus. I'm so sorry for hurting on you, spit on you, everything. I'm sorry for everything. Bonbon protested through her sobs of mixed emotions and sorrow. Shh, it's okay. I forgive you, Hard Candy. I forgive you from everything you and the others did, Lyra said softly, continuing to comfort the mare that used to be her worst enemy. In the pause of the emotions and sadness, Hard Candy pulled away, wiping her eyes clear of tears, revealing puffy, bloodshot eyes. Actually, my real name isn't Hard Candy, explained the mare. Hard Candy was just the name that the group gave me because my real name was considered stupid and unworthy to them. Lyra was curious and shocked at the same time. She had only known this mare as Hard Candy, yet that wasn't even her real name? Then what's your real name besides Hard Candy? Lyra asked. The mare pushed, turning her away from Lyra. It's stupid. You'd laugh at it, she replied with a shaky voice. Try me, Lyra proposed. Can't be worse than mine. Taking a deep whiff inward, the mare with no name stuttered out the answer. My real name is Bonbon, confessed the mare. Lyra took the name and let out a small chuckle. That's pretty silly, she confessed. I knew you'd laugh, Bonbon pouted in anger. Lyra shook her head, reassuring Bonbon that she was mistaken for what she meant. It's funny in a good way. I love it, Lyra reassured. Bonbon was unsure of how to answer that, seeing that she wasn't sure if this mare was pulling her leg or if she was sincere. You think your name is silly? I'm named after an instrument, Lyra confessed. My name's Lyra. Lyra Heartstrings. Once the name was announced, Bonbon immediately burst into mild laughter. Wow, you weren't kidding. Compared to my name, your name is definitely worse than mine, she said, continuing to laugh. Lyra took no offense, as this was her intention from the start. See, we fit perfectly, Lyra reassured. Well, I guess we do, Bonbon agreed, as they both burst into a fit of laughter. From that moment forward, Lyra and Bonbon had been inseparable. The two ponies that hated each other once turned out to be a perfect couple. It wasn't until college that the two discovered their preferred choice of gender. It was a challenge for them both to bright light, but it became obvious after their friendship had started to become more intimate. The two would have occasional mare nights where they'd get together and do whatever the night brought them. First time when it came to Lyra was started to get aroused from the sight of Bonbon. Along with her constantly getting nervous around her, it was to the point where she began to fancy herself up whenever the two met up, whenever it be a simple task or a mare night. A second sign came in when she had to share a bed with Bonbon one night. She constantly found herself nuzzling up against Bonbon and enjoying the feeling of Bonbon's body heat up against her body. It had happened many times that Lyra ended up sleeping elsewhere to avoid Bonbon catching her in the act of nuzzling up against her. She had also had the urge to do much more, but ended up being unable to control herself from doing such acts. At first, she wondered if it was just accidental, and maybe it was due to her body looking to the heat to warm up on her body. She quickly debunked that it was negative, because it had not been a cold night. They had even slept on the top covers for her to escape the heat. At last, and the obvious sign that she was attracted to Bonbon immediately and romantically, was the two accidentally kissed. It had been a one-mare night, when Bonbon had made it to the kitchen for a snack. Lyra had decided to check on Bonbon, seeing if she had taken longer than usual. And just like how most accidental kisses occur, the two had bumped into one another, and in that sudden action, pecked their lips together. They both knew it was accidental, but at the same time, both mares felt something special, and didn't want it to end. Bonbon especially seen, too, as she found herself feeling strange around Lyra. The night that Lyra had been nuzzling against her, it had woken her, but she loved the feeling of Lyra nuzzling against her body and nearly cried when Lyra moved far away from her. Both came clean down with the marish night, and even through the conversation was uncomfortable. It was hard for both mares. It ended up with them experimenting with one another to see if their assumptions were right or wrong. It didn't take long to figure out that they were both right, resulting in a night of bliss. Both of them didn't get judged for being a couple of the same gender, but as long as they had each other, they didn't care about what other ponies think about their relationship. As long as they made their way into Ponyville Market, numerous stallions and mares stared daggers at them. The couple just shrugged it off, the fact that they were being stared down, and continued with their business in the market. Bonbon was normally the one who handled the shopping, so Lyra just stood idle, answering all the questions that may have been addressed to her. So the ponies had made a motion for them to stare at them. Lyra just gave them a rolling eye, showing one that she's not offended or affected by their attempt of insult. As usual, our shopping trip didn't take anyone as noticed any more than 10 set minutes. Bonbon had preferred Pony to go out for payment. The pony was a young mare named Sunflower or Spring, and she had only been working as a cashier in Ponyville Market for a little over a year. It was the same with a few ponies that judged Bonbon and Lyra for being a same-sex couple, thus why she was Bonbon's preferred cashier. "Good morning, Sunflower," Bonbon said in a green tone. "Bonbon, how's my best customer? Or should I say customers?" Sunflower greeted in a happy voice. "The best will ever be," Bonbon replied, referring to the multiple daggers being shot around in the marketplace. "Never mind them. You know, they only do it because they're the ones that have a problem with your relationship, and would be weirdly looking if they didn't follow," Sunflower assured, writing down the prices for Bonbon's items that had purchased. "Sad to say the ponies like that don't do that anymore," Bonbon agreed, grabbing her small purse to pay for the items. While doing the math for the final tally, Sunflower had then spotted an item of interest. "Wine? I didn't even think you were as an alcohol drinker, Bonbon." Sunflower questioned in mild surprise. "I only drink for special occasions," Bonbon clarified. "Oh, do tell. What's the occurrence?" Sunflower asked, with much curiosity and wide eyes. "Well, today marks mine and Lyra's 1-year anniversary, and we want to do something special for the occasion," Bonbon confirmed, her beloved nuzzling her muzzle in a romantic manner. "Happy anniversary, you two!" Sunflower exclaimed happily. Sunflower quickly dropped the pencil, as she had to use to tally up the total of purchases, and then leaned forward, motioning for the couple to follow her lead. Bonbon and Lyra leaned forward, following Sunflower's lead. "The wine's on the house," Sunflower whispered. "Take it and have a great anniversary. Be sure to save me a glass, though." Bonbon giggled, nodding her head as she waited for the final price. "That brings you the total of 50 bits," Sunflower confirmed, knocking off the additional 100 bits that would have been added if the wine were not free of charge. Bonbon laid 60 bits out on the counter, tipping Sunflower as an additional 10 bits for the free wine. Sunflower bagged and the additional items, handed them to Bonbon, and collected her tip, placing the other 50 in the register. "I'll be sure to save you a glass," Bonbon whispered, and then walked out of the market, noticing Sunflower wink in one of her eyes. "I'll look forward to it." About an hour had passed, and the scent of the secret dish Bonbon had decided to cook for the engulfed of the house. Lyra sat idle in the living room couch. She felt her stomach growl, and at the smell of the dish that Bonbon had forbidden Lyra from even seeing. Licking her lips at the aroma of the scent was like a freshly baked loaf of bread with a hint of some ingredients that Lyra was not familiar with. She knew that one thing about the dish was its scent. It was a fancy dish, causing Lyra to wonder where Bonbon had learned to cook so well. If this dish was anything compared to the blueberry pancakes she had cooked for breakfast that morning, Lyra wasn't so sure what to expect. At the sound of the clattering of dish plates, along with the silverware being placed on the kitchen table, Lyra suspected that dinner was close to being served. Her theory was confirmed when Bonbon stood in the kitchen entranceway, holding a smile. "Dinner's ready," Bonbon said cheerfully. Lyra quickly made her way to Bonbon and took off her hooves into hers. Navigating into the kitchen, they released a set of table with 2 dishes and 2 wine glasses set idle. The dish smelled and looked delicious. As Lyra sat down in her provided chair and waited for Bonbon to take a seat before her doing anything else. Once Bonbon was seated, she placed out her hoof, to which Lyra quickly took into hers. "For us, I decided to try something different and unique," Bonbon said. "Something that resembles our love and our relationship." Bonbon released Lyra, and then, in an illusion that the 2 mares took a bite of each of the dish, which looked like some sort of Macintosh dish, spread with sauce that compared of multiple spices, topped with daisies. The red rose petals outlined the plates, with the bottle of wine next to the wine glasses. In Lyra's mind, it seemed like a fitting dish and the vibe of romance, perfect for the romantic occasion. Sticking their bites into their mouths, both of them immediately were baffled by the taste. The spice variation was perfect, with no spice overpowering another, and the sauce had a perfect amount of sweetness to it. Just a small hint of spiciness, however. The cheese and daisies added a kick that gave the dish just the right amount of taste to taste out the spiciness, causing the 2 of them to both smile. Bonbon had succeeded in her very first try. Lyra smiled, assuring her love for Bonbon. That the dish was delicious, to which Bonbon caught and smiled back, and she reached for her wine, but Lyra was quickly intervened. "Allow me," Lyra assured. "It's the least I can do after all the love and effort you put into this dish, Bons." Bonbon blushed, pulling out her hoof back, allowing Lyra to pour her glass. Carefully, Lyra used a provided corkscrew to release the cork from the bottle's opening, and with the focus of a gentle care, poured the red liquid onto Bonbon's glass. She then followed afterward, pouring herself a glass. Lyra wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of wine, but for this occasion, she could make an exception. She set the wine to the side and grabbed her glass, raising the glass into the air. Bonbon followed, raising her glass as well. "To us and many more years of being together," Bonbon announced as the glasses clinked together. The 2 mares took a sip from their glasses then. Sitting at their respective glasses to their side, Lyra and Bonbon dug into their dishes once again, staring at each other's eyes as they ate. The sound of Ponyville's fountain running water relaxed the couple as they sat down on one of the provided benches, admiring the monument. Both of them were slightly buzzed from the drinking, and a bit too much wine was the running water that helped ease their minds. They would be regretting it in the morning, but in that moment, neither of them cared about the slightest of what would follow the next day. This was their night. Lyra, being the most affected by the alcohol, sat nuzzled up Bonbon's soft chest, breathing in the mixed smell of their dish of dinner and Bonbon's preferred body wash. The body wash smelled like a mixture of wildflowers, including her favorite, a very rare flower that only grew in certain places throughout Equestria, the midnight blue lotus. She had only seen this in her lifetime when she was a filly, navigating through one of the most popular landmarks of Equestria, a set of caves that were said to be had formed by a dragon centuries before the births of the royal sisters, a landmark as known as Dragon's Burrow. Lyra had visited the landmark, and while the guide had been leading the group through the caves, she had spotted a large group of small blue flowers. The flower had seemed mystic, with its petals in having variation of colors. The flower only grew in damp and dark areas, whereas natural streams of water that ran through underground, allowing the plant to grow naturally. The smell of the plant imitated as the mystic smell, and it was rumored to even have healing properties. Ever since that day, Lyra had been infatuated with the flower, and it was the main reason why her favorite color was midnight blue. Whether or not the scent had healing properties, it was a mystery to her. Bonbon gently ran her hoof through Lyra's mane, as the 2 drunken mares watched Celestia's sun slowly lower before the horizon, and Luna's moon take its place in the starry sky. It was truly one of the Bonbon's favorite signs to watch, especially with Lyra. The pair had made it to their nightly activities even before the knot had been tied. It was definitely something both of them could enjoy, drunk or not. Ready to go home? Bonbon asked nicely. Lyra nodded her head yes in response, too buzzed to even bother responding. Bonbon giggled, helping Lyra from the bench. Come on, Lyra drunk strings, Bonbon said playfully. Don't be falling asleep too quickly. I still have one more activity before our anniversary ends. Lyra then jumped at the statement, knowing what Bonbon was referring to. Oh, don't worry, Bonbon. I'm not buzzed out enough to miss that, she then said seductively, giving Bonbon a look of that aroused Bonbon just a little. I figured so, Bonbon replied back, with her now tone of seduction. You better hold up to your word, otherwise I might have more of a rough than I usually am. That tone, around Lyra, almost immediately her body grew hot as Bonbon's look of seductive encouragement. You can go as rough as you want, Bonds. I just be warned I don't play nice back, Lyra whispered seductively into Bonbon's ear, causing her body to immediately heat up in arousement. I look forward to it, Bonbon whispered, back in Lyra's ears as the pair made their way back to their home, yet for a night of bliss, not hearing another loud explosion in the distance. The following morning then started off with nothing but a pounding headache for Lyra. Bonbon was able to shake off a little bit of the effects underneath easily. It wasn't their first ordeal with the aftermath of drinking, just a little too much alcohol, so she had grown used to the hangovers. Despite her head feeling like it was going to explode, Lyra hadn't regretted the events of the previous night, especially the end activities. One thing was reassured is after the final activity, she had slept like a newborn foal throughout the remainder of the night. Bonbon had kept her word and had tired her out, but that didn't mean she hadn't kept hers as well. The two mares had passed out in the embrace of both of their actions and the alcohol. Bonbon had awoken first, as usual as round before hopping out of bed and proceeding to take a shower. Had slightly kissed Lyra on the left cheek. The sound of the shower started up, and what was caused Lyra to stir, and almost immediately her head had begun to pound, as much as she didn't want to leave the comfort of her bed. She already knew what she had to do. She lifted the sheets from her body and scurried to the bathroom. Her steps were like booming stomps of a dragon or giant, causing her head to ache. However, the stream of bathroom that escaped while opening the door helped to cease the thumping against her skull. The shower continued to run as Lyra gazed herself in the mirror. Her mane was ruffled and sweaty, which had caused her to startle a little, but she quickly stirred back into reality and just smiled at her reflection. What a night, she said, with a slight giggle escaping from her mouth. She quickly provided the brush of Aurora magic and ran the brush through her messy mane in an attempt to style it just a teeny bit. She then placed on the plan to shower as well, but Lyra preferred not to deal with the snags while shampooing her mane, so she always brushed her mane prior to washing. Luckily for her, the brush's bristles guided through the mane without snagging. However, the process, something unusual, caught Lyra's attention. Her head, she swore she had seen a mild whisper amongst the sound of the shower and the thumping against her skull. Lyra thought about asking Bonbon if she had something, or if she might have been whispering back the Countess Coritra's last record. But then she remembered that she had drank a little too much wine too. Probably just a side effect from the hangover, Lyra thought to herself, shrugging off whatever she may have not heard. She finished brushing her mane and quickly hopped into the shower with her beloved Bonbon, not an uncommon action, seeing the two had showering together even quite before marriage. The hot water eased Lyra's pounding headache as it ran through her body, along with the light kiss from Bonbon. Lyra smiled as Bonbon made the conversation with her. Rough morning? Bonbon asked. You have no idea, Lyra replied, giggling. My head feels like it's going to explode. That's normal, Bonbon calmed sweetly. Don't worry, I have some remedies that will help with your headache. I wouldn't doubt that, Lyra said with another giggle. Bonbon responded with her own giggle, leaning in for another kiss, which Lyra had accepted it and enjoyed in the mix of the heat of the shower, and being against the presence of her beloved Bonbon. The kiss was released quickly, as Bonbon nuzzled her head against Lyra's. "All right, when you've finished, come into the back of the bedroom," Bonbon said sweetly. "Best cure for a hangover is rest." "All right," Lyra replied, kissing Bonbon sweetly. Bonbon accepted it and released it, turning from Lyra and stamping out of the shower, leaving Lyra to do her own thoughts. Lyra then proceeded to grab the bottle of shampoo, not wanting to waste any more time than she intended to. Her head continued to pound as she squirted the small bits of glob shampoo into her hoof. Rubbing her hooves together, she had maneuvered it through her mane. The shampoo quickly turned into suds as she did her best to wash out the sweat and whatever else that might have been in her mane. While washing, Lyra once again caught something unusual. Just like before brushing her mane, Lyra once heard again something mild whisper in her head. Once again, Lyra just decided to shrug it aside and just the effects of a hangover. She continued to finish up washing her body. Once she finished up in the shower, Lyra returned to her bedroom as Bonbon had instructed. Bonbon was standing at Lyra's bedside with sheets folded over nicely. "Just take it nice and easy. Slow and steady steps," Bonbon instructed. Lyra followed her beloved instructions and, taking it easy, stepped forward towards the bed. Her headache had fallen into a more milder level of pain from the stream of the shower. Therefore, the steps no longer felt like thumps against her frontal lobe. Slowly and steadily, she made her way to Bonbon and positioned her body into a comfortable position. Bonbon assisted, lying the sheets over Lyra's body gently. Bonbon followed up, placing the glass of cold water on the surface of Lyra's nightstand. "Get some rest, and in between rest breaks, I want you to drink this water cup slowly," Bonbon instructed, sweet and motherly tone. "If you need anything, just yell for me, and don't get up." "All right, Mom," Lyra joked, causing Bonbon to giggle, and rolled her eyes. "All right, no more jokes," Bonbon said sweetly. "Water and rest, you got it?" "Got it," Lyra replied sweetly. As Bonbon turned away, walked out of the room, closed the door behind her, at the end of the sound of the door closing, Lyra followed Bonbon's instructions. Taking a small sip of water, she swallowed the cold liquid down her throat and then closed her eyes into a slumber. Lyra opened her eyes, only to find herself in her bed, her limbs aching and her head feeling like small bombs were going off in her skull. Bonbon was there with her, snoozing like a fool, and a smile spread across her face. Bonbon's mane was a sweaty mess, looking as if her mane had been ruffled by some pony. Lyra had just smiled, listening to Bonbon's sweet and shallow breaths. Lyra attempted to lean inward for a kiss, but found her body unable to budge from its current position. Lyra attempted to move, but it was as if her body was full of lead. She couldn't even move a muscle, causing her to immediately panic in desperation. Beginning to overhear something as she swore she recognized, a shallow whisper, muttering something that she couldn't make out. It was when her body began to move, but not like by her own force. Her body had moved on top of Bonbon's body in a dominant mount. She felt like she was watching a movie, only instead of the movie on a screen, it was from her line of sight. She thought she was going to wake Bonbon by booping her nose, but the things took an immediate dark turn when she saw her hooves reach out for one of her spare pillows, gripping it and moving it over towards Bonbon's head. Lyra felt a tear escape in her eye. She screamed for Bonbon to wake up, only for her screams to be unheard. The climax came as Lyra watched in terror and shock, her hooves gripping the pillow, flailed down violently over Bonbon's head. Bonbon didn't move at first, she only continued to sleep, until her inability to breathe finally came to her attention, and Bonbon began to struggle and flail her hooves in desperation. Bonbon's screams of desperation only came out as mutters of fear and sadness and pure desperation. As a result, the pillow was just pressed down even harder than Bonbon's head. Lyra just screams of silence and terror, watching over the horror unfold. She cried desperately, unable to escape the horror. After much longer than it normally would take for a pony to suffocate, Bonbon finally began to succumb to suffocation. Lyra just wanted her to close her eyes and escape from this Tartarus that she had entered. Watching her beloved fell limp. Just as she thought the worst had passed, the pillow was lifted, revealing a pale Bonbon. However, with the sudden inhalation of air, it was clear that Bonbon had been spared, but only had a small shred of life left in her. The events of this took a grim turn once again. Lyra remained on top of Bonbon, raising her hooves into the air. Lyra had already broken, had no choice but to watch her as her other body came down on her with her hooves, straight for the face of Bonbon. The horrid image of blood splattering into her sight became visible, a monster with Bonbon having a horribly broken muzzle. Blood seeped from her nostrils, as yet he never hammered fists, and landed on Bonbon's face, causing more blood and obstructed her vision. But at this point, that Lyra had reached the urge to vomit, watching the horror continue. Another hammer fist and hit, and then another, and another. Blood splattered all over the walls. The bed was soaked with crimson, and Lyra's vision had become nothing but crimson red filter. The worst part of all was that Bonbon was still alive by a tiny shred. Lyra prayed that this horror was over, but it soon became obvious that it wasn't. The events continued to worsen. The unknown Lyra had begun to drag Bonbon's near lifeless body out of the bed, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. Lyra immediately shuddered, knowing what this was and where this was going. Noticing the sink full of water, her fears came true as she watched her body dunk out of the head of Bonbon into the water. She cried for mercy, wanting this horror show to end, but it didn't. It only continued to devastate and tear Lyra apart. Every time Bonbon would be close to drowning, the most monstrous vision of Lyra would immediately pull her head out from the crimson water. This action repeated multiple times, until finally Bonbon was left in the water to drown for good. Lyra sobbed massively, watching the demented version of herself making its way back up the stairs and into the bathroom. It stood before the mirror, reflecting a blood-soaked vision of herself in dread and unconventional terror. Lyra continued to urge to hold back vomit. She didn't know what to believe. All she knew is that she couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. She had killed her beloved in a very brutal and male-violent manner. In the mixture of terror, confusion, and loss, she overheard the same mild whisper once again. What followed was completely unexpected. The other Lyra smashed her head against the bathroom mirror, causing the shards of glass to fly everywhere. The impact had caused the mirror to fall into the bathroom floor, but felt something strange about the ordeal was that Lyra had actually felt the impact, yet she wasn't bleeding like some other pony. The final set of the horrid sequence events ended with the other Lyra gripping the glass shard and impaling the shard into her throat, slashing it violently through the entire perimeter of her small throat. Lyra felt the pain sting in her entire throat, but nothing happened to her, while her other self convulsed onto the floor, gagged in the massive pool of blood forming around her. It all ended with the perspective fading to pitch black. Before the screaming of desperation, escaping this Tartarus, she heard the same mild whisper, reverberate throughout the wherever she may have been. The whisper broke something that she couldn't make out as she screamed in desperation.